Interview with Jerry Garcia by Howard Rheingold, June 27th, 1990. Name it easier.
Yeah, sure.
In case gremlins erase the tape, I'll just try to remember it as best. I usually try to check quotes with people.
Yeah.
Just to make sure things work out. So I will check any quotes through John.
Excellent.
For you.
Yeah, he's good for that.
I thought you had seen the VTL one.
Not yet. No, I haven't. I'm still waiting to see it. It's just one of those things that just hasn't happened.
I was motivated to call you because I ran into a fellow who I know who's involved in this named Mike Miller. Who said I ran into you in a party and that you were very interested in.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
So back to what I was writing there. So how can we shed some light on this issue?
Well, I think the real problem is going to be the thing of avoiding making it look like too much fun. I mean, there's already some crackling around the edges I've heard of people who are afraid that it's going to be the whole notion is going to be treated kind of like a drug.
Yeah.
There will be certain limitations possibly. Or possibly legislation or something. That's the whole thing. So this is where this gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
The whole idea, the virtual reality idea, if you progress it far enough, it's like starts to transcend things like language. You know what I mean? It's going to take experience beyond intellect in some levels. You know what I mean?
Yes.
The thing of being able to share somebody's reality, which has so far been a matter of what communication is about, you know. Now it's gotten a whole new leg. It's gotten the thing of being able to actually step in somebody's reality and walk through it like they do, experience it the way they do specifically. The implications to me are immense. I mean, how far could it go? You know, I mean, if you go into a complete like a cyberspace model of some kind, in which you know, the discussion about the mind and the interaction between the mind and the universe is a holographic phenomena.
Yes.
That sort of Marilyn, what's her name's,
Ferguson.
Marilyn Ferguson's been sort of monitoring that discussion in the Brain News and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember one where the headline was a primary reality, a numerical realm or something like that.
Yeah.
And the idea that, I mean, for example, some hypothetical. I mean, the technology is getting smaller like this. Eventually, would be a thing that you'd put on, you know, that you would wear that would translate all of the material out here into some other kind of language, possibly other visual language, so that things would look the way you wanted them to. You know?
Yes.
Reality would behave the way you wanted it to, whether it did or whether it really did or not. So the whole question of what's real and what isn't starts to get real mushy right there. If everybody's experiencing completely subjective realities based on their own temperament or whatever they want, you know, including however far you wanted to take it. Now, this as far as, if you think of the drug experience as getting away from something or getting towards something, like getting away from something if you're a ghetto person,
Yes.
you know, a nice soft experience like heroin, you know.
Right.
The objection there seems to be the idea of getting away, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, what is it all about? So I see basic objection about going on with this virtual reality. If you take it for it, I mean, the whole thing is that it eliminates a lot of the need for all of the other things that we've put so much energy into all this time. Communication on every other level starts to be unnecessary. I mean, I'm a musician. I recognize that as a musician, there's a certain chauvinism attached to it, which is the thing of, well, I spent my time learning how to play. You know, you didn't spend time learning how to play, therefore you're not a musician. Well, in reality, everybody's got musical thoughts. If you are able to overcome the part of it, which is muscle training, which is what most musical playing actually is, performance actually is muscle training, and you are able to convert your ideas directly into music, you're a musician too. You know, everybody can make their own music. Everybody can produce incredibly beautiful music, and there could be. I mean, how many Beethovens are there that just for lack of training and the world doesn't get exposed to? You know what I mean?
Right.
That's looking at it from my point of view. In other words, the idea of professional musician, we could lose that somewhere along the line. You know,
Yes.
if this stuff pans out far enough. so that people would produce their own music, and people would have music that would fit their subjective reality. They would have their own background music, which they carry through with them through life, adding to it or subtracting from it, and so on.
Yes. There are also performances in which the people who have the best muscle skills and musical history may be on the stage.
Absolutely.
But it's not like a dead show is not like a usual sit-down performance.
No, it's more...
The audience does
There's some synesthesia involved. Yeah, they are involved. Right. Well, that involvement could get deeper and deeper. I mean, it could be that performances in the future would be like an audience wired to somebody who was sort of instigating, rather than... and then moment-to-moment creation would be transmuted individually. I mean, the satisfaction of producing a work of art is the thing of getting off on it on some level. This makes it so that the whole idea of, for me, the thing of being able to see notes and see musical landscapes, is an relatively obvious part of this experience. The thing of being able to sort of fly.
So when you tried it out, that was sort of what you extrapolated.
To me it was obvious. I mean, if you can create a reality that's entirely fictitious, it doesn't owe anything to this stuff out here, but you interact with it on your own terms. I mean, if you took it to the point where finally you got, say, tactile feedback that worked, and so that you were wired in on in terms of the whole your whole nervous system.
Yes.
The sensorium, you'd have the ultimate art form. I mean, any painter would want it, any filmmaker would want access to it. Any musician would want access to it, and it would eliminate the need for the divisions between what we describe as the arts, converting the whole thing to experience.
Yes.
See, but that takes a lot of baggage along with it. You know what I mean? And it means that there's a lot of stuff that you don't need anymore, particularly. Yes.
Well,
I mean, it's revolutionary in a big way.
Threatening part is.
That's it. Because somewhere along there, we're starting to bump into chaos now, as the lines between hearing and touch are blurred. Now you're starting to get into this kind of chaos. And I remember in some kind of part of that automatic writing kind of psychic literature stuff about Lemuria and ancient Egypt that you bump into occasionally. There was something in there about the fall of the early magically oriented societies pre-Atlantean, was that they had control over form, and that there was just too great a variety of forms that people were becoming anything they wanted to, any animal, anything like that, and that part of the process of part of the reaction to it was the desire to restrict the forms to the forms that we are familiar with now. This stuff is all stuff that bubbles out of the subconscious of people. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know. It doesn't have any relation to real historicity, but it's part of the mythos. And there's a metaphor in there somewhere about that thing of losing some sense of what the bounds of reality are. What your experience is. And I think it's the basic threat of drugs, psychedelics specifically, is somewhere tied into that. And that this virtual reality stuff is the technological equivalent, really, of psychedelics. And I can see that I think that part of it is going to be the thing of being able to make this look like something else, just to avoid that kind of interference. Did you read Barlow's thing about? He's just been handing it out. Do you know John?
Yes, I saw him last night, in fact.
Yeah, did you read his thing about these people who are getting busted, the hackers that are getting busted for...
Yeah, I'm involved with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is what they decided to call it, which is...
That's right. Oh, you know all about it then. Well, that's...
Yeah, well...
that's not even... I mean, here we're not even talking about what the experiences... how the experiences how it's affecting consciousness, but just the idea that you can move around freely seems to be scaring the shit out of something. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Some authoritarian, shadowy, deal is out there. You know.
Well, the world is restructuring, and all the enemies that used to exist are kind of gone. So
That's
now
right.
they're looking around for
new enemies.
ones.
Absolutely.
See, technology used to be our friend.
Right.
But now nobody's quite so sure.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it's like all tools. It cuts both ways. It works for you and it works against you. It's just the thing of the somewhere like the guy that's working on the nanotechnology discussion.
Yes.
His concept of cage technology, I think, is good.
Yes.
If you're going to develop beast technology, you want to start by having cage technology.
Yes.
So you want to make the rules first.
Keep the sucker from getting out and eating you alive.
Absolutely right.
The thing about giving the government computers.
Absolutely. Well, that's the nanotechnology. The capacity for disaster there is incredible.
Sure is.
I think that's an appropriate.
Yes, it's too late, by the way, with virtual reality.
Yeah, it's too late. Can't be done.
Back in the bottle.
Yeah, it can't go back. It's out. Right. I think
virtual reality might be able to give you a way of doing hands-on to construct ideas in a computer.
Well, that's the whole.
Yeah.
That's what I think it's originally for, in the simplest sense. I mean, my understanding was that it was an architectural aid.
Yeah, right.
So you could build a building and walk through it before you actually have to put it up.
Yes, they've actually.
You look out
there
the
actually are
windows and go
buildings
up the stairs,
that existed in cyberspace before they built it.
Right, and that way you can look around the corners and see the doors open correctly.
I've
And,
always wanted
look out the
some way
windows.
that you could make a surface in a computer, describe like you would like to pick up a piece of clay and make a sculpture.
You can do
Yes.
it.
How do you make a surface in a computer without being able to put your hands on it?
Well,
Well,
that's
the
happening
whole.
now.
That's happening now with the hands. Now you got the hands. So you reach into the cyberspace and you grab some cyber stuff and
Sort of smooth little.
build it
surface
up, and the
out
computer
air.
will give you a 360 of it.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
I'd love it.
Well, the other possibility is that it's the doorway to a singularity,
Yeah.
in the sense that if you look at where have we been aiming all this time?
Uh-huh.
That section I sent you was from the beginning of the book. I'm really saying that some human beings were human beings anatomically for several 100,000 years, wandering around, hunting and gathering,
Yeah.
and then suddenly, at the same time, they started painting in caves. They
Right.
started multiplying. So
Right.
what this paleontologist that I quoted has the theory that the first art in caves were really psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
And the reason that they were is so that because the tribal encyclopedia, the amount of information that people needed to know in order to move to a new way of life,
Right.
suddenly increased.
That's right. Yeah, that's
so
a
how
good,
are you
that's
going
a
to
good
print
notion. Yeah, the point is there's more information now than you can pass along comfortably in an oral tradition. Say a strictly speaking culture has a problem.
Nobody's delineating it. Nobody's concentrating.
Right.
There's a lot of extraneous stuff. Like, for instance, the satellites that measure the atmosphere.
Yeah.
There's billions and billions and billions of bytes of data, only maybe 2% of which are actually useful. They don't know what the rest are for. They don't know what good they
That's
are.
right.
But
People
they're
want to
still
fly
there.
through that.
Fill up
that
tapes
data.
and things.
Yeah.
And anyway, who knows for sure how complex or how uncomplex the ancient people's lives were. They may have been in many ways as absolutely full and complicated as anything anyone lives.
I don't think there's any reason to assume they weren't. I mean, if you look at some of these cultures now, and there's still a few of them.
No, that's true. See, but that's what I mean about the singularity.
Yeah.
Is that the entire human race faced a singularity when one small group discovered, technology.
Right.
We can live a different way.
Right.
Eventually, that spelled the death of the old way of life.
Inevitably.
Well, don't you
So-
think that the fact that this discovery came to a feudalistic society meant that it had a different impact than if it had, say, come to a society that was organized?
Well, technology is another
Bible?
blurry line, though. I mean, technology
Yes,
didn't
yeah,
just go
yeah.
clunk. Technology
That's
is
right.
a slow. It was this
process.
early disease, starting with a plow, I guess, or something like that. The first tool that
The
made
first-
it
the
made it
first
so you
horse
could
that
do
was
more.
ridden.
Yeah, yeah,
The first horse that was
yeah. Maybe the first domesticated
first
animal
wheel.
or
And
something. The first
horse
wheel.
was the first
Well,
lever,
it turned where you pay attention to from the outside in.
Right.
If you depend on where the chestnuts are going to be and where the deer are, you have to be attuned to the outside
Which
world.
plants can cure
Right.
which diseases and which are
Right.
good to get
Yeah,
by.
then you're.
Right.
Yeah, then you got to know.
What
You got to
weeds
know
are
the
best
stuff.
for binding the stone heads
Yeah.
on your knives. And,
Well, that kind of information you can hold
yeah.
up, and I guess,
And
in
you learn a lot of things. People learn a lot of things.
Well, that's knowledge of how the world works.
Yeah.
Technology is knowledge of how the universe works that enables you to shape
manipulate
the
the
world.
world, right?
So, but see, there are these two strands, the Dionysian and the Apollonian, and
Yeah.
at the same theater grew up from these folks who during the day were just ordinary citizens, and at night they would sneak off to the woods
And get
party.
crazy. Right.
And they would party in these natural amphitheaters.
Absolutely.
And when the Apollonian strain took over in Greece, they made them into theaters.
Right.
And the original dramas. Now, of course, like, fancy people go to the opera and see drama and they regard that as high culture.
Right.
And these are really people, for the most part, who get it tight at the idea that people might take their clothes off and dance in the streets.
That's right.
Do you think psychedelics had a part of that?
So,
Absolutely. It's
I mean,
the
that's-
Dionysian concept.
Well, the Elysian mysteries, according to a conversation I had with Albert Hoffman when I met him a couple years ago, he said that the Elysians always drunk a preparation that was made from grain,
Yes.
and so for a long time people thought it was alcohol.
Yes.
Said, but more recent investigations is that it was not made from an ordinary grain; it was made from the seeds of the paspalum grass.
Do you guys know each other?
No, I'm Howard. Hi, Howard Rheingold.
People call me Bear. My
Bear.
name is Owsley Stanley.
Oh, yeah. I remember you.
He said that the paspalum grass has a fungus that grows on it, a claviceps fungus. It's
Yeah.
Claviceps paspali, and it's used mostly for the culture and cultivation of water-soluble alkaloids based on lysergic acid.
Yes.
It has a lot of organobi, and it's the one that they make lysergic acid from because it's easiest to cleave, unlike ergotamine, which is only about 40% lysergic acid. This stuff's like 75 or 80%.
Yes.
And he said that one of the constituents of it, which was not discovered right in the beginning, was lysergic acid methyl hydroxylamine, which is, he says, very, very, very similar to LSD in its effects, but doesn't, the extraction and testing processes that they use reduce it to lysergic acid amide.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's prepared in the way in which they prepared that drink, it would have been the principal constituency. So in other words, they were drinking a drink that was very rich in an almost identical physiological substance to LSD.
Well, now, you remember when Joseph Campbell gave that talk with Mickey at the
Sure.
Palace of Fine Arts?
I was there.
Okay, he had that plate he showed.
Yeah.
The thing about those mysteries was under pain of death, you couldn't tell what happened.
Right.
But they found this plate that had these kind of coded icons,
Right.
and he went through it, and his version of it was that the initiate drunk this stuff, which was maybe psychedelic, and they went through these symbolic actions that had to do
Yeah.
with death and life and death.
Right.
Let the body is just the vehicle for something else. And then they reached the climax of it. They had a virtual reality device. He had this polished bowl that had circumference. The curve of the bowl was such that if they held it in front of you and put a skull back here, you would see your image with a skull's face superimposed on
Right.
it,
Excellent.
right at the climax of the ceremony.
Excellent. Right.
So, I mean, it's sort of the same story. Isn't
Yes, it is. It definitely is. Yeah. Right.
So the question is, okay, now two things are happening. The technological civilization has now dominated the earth to the point where there's a big question of what's going to happen next.
it's a threat.
It's a threat,
And the fact that
and it's a
people-
challenge, because if we are going to continue, it has to be in some completely new way.
Right. It's a test.
Yeah.
And
We got
we're
too
given
many
this
people,
portal
so
to
that's
this.
another serious problem.
Well, that's part of the test.
It's part of the test. How do
Yeah.
we,
Part of the test is, well, I've always had the basic biological question about in terms of evolution. If the drive to evolution is like to survive, an organism that survives well, there's really no need for consciousness in there.
That's right. All
So-
you have to do is mate.
Yeah,
And then
all you need to
you're
be is a
done.
shark or anything, you know. I mean, there's any number of things that survive great and don't need any
As long
consciousness
as
at all.
you're not, as long as your
Crocodile.
niche is
So
not
why
messed with.
why bother to go to all the trouble of evolving
Into a complicated
monkeys that don't run very well or climb very fast
Right.
or have particularly sharp teeth but have big heads?
big brains, right?
Yeah. And,
Well, of course,
you know,
Terrence has this theory that it was because the monkey started eating mushrooms.
well,
and
that's
cowpox.
that's an interesting
Well,
theory.
how did
It could be true, you know. It could be true.
How'd the dolphins and whales get such big brains? They obviously don't need great big brains to catch
They
fish.
don't even need
Fingers, hands.
yeah,
right?
they don't need
But
any
they have
of
a
that shit.
brain that's actually bigger in proportion to their size than we have.
That's
Very
true.
complex.
But I think it probably
They're thinkers is what they
I'm
are.
sure they probably are thinkers, but they're also they're also operating in three-dimensional space, and the navigational gears on board must be tremendous.
Well, so's a bat.
Yeah.
I mean, and with similar complicated
Well,
navigational
it's
gear that catches
brain
even
weight
more
to body
elusive-
weight is probably pretty similar.
Well, in fact, there's a fellow who wrote a book called
Yeah, it's
The
probably
Throwing Madonna, in which he claims that the areas in the brain that have to do with speech are very connected with the same parallel processors that have to do with the kind of ballistic calculations you need to hit small game with the rock. So he says, back in the really early days,
eye-hand
the men went out
relationships.
hunting.
Eye-hand
The women stayed home with the kids.
Yeah.
And they would hold the kids, the kid in one arm,
Right.
against the heart, so that's the left arm, and with the right arm they would throw.
Throw stuff.
And it turns out that you cannot make that calculation in real time. You have to have an algorithm set up. So these brain mechanisms evolved in order to do that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And when they evolved, the thing is that when there is a useful capability, it often adapts to places that it wasn't evolved for.
Right, of course, right.
Like
right.
dinosaurs grew feathers for heat regulation, but
Right.
the ones who started flying started becoming birds.
Right.
He said speech involves exactly the same kind of sequencing. As I'm talking to you, I'm lining up all these railroads in a marshalling yard in my brain.
Right.
Which ones I choose, how I move my tongue.
Gotcha. So it's a side effect. Consciousness is a side effect of being able to throw a rock and hit something.
Yes. Well, which is
Maybe.
interesting because computers were originally invented to do ballistic equations.
Yeah, right.
So we're seeing this kind of tension between the Darwinian competition part of evolution and this. Gee, it really looks as
Yeah.
if we're going towards something.
Well, yeah.
Computers were used for cryptography
That too.
during World War II.
Well, cryptography is also a linguistic thing, so it amounts to the same thing. Problem solving.
Yeah, right.
So it's a language machine.
Uh-huh.
Humans are language machines.
Yeah.
Computers are language machines.
Right.
And this artificial reality
It's a
appears-
hyperlanguage, in a way.
Yeah,
Yes,
right, it would be.
right.
Yeah, in a way. It's a hyperlanguage based on experience.
Well, see, it's always frightening to the folks who are going to be left behind when they see
Right.
new things popping up.
Yeah.
Sure, it's scary.
That's why you need to keep taking psychedelics to keep your brain young, keep your mind young. So
Yeah.
When your body gets older, your mind still can always accept that. First time I ever took acid, got really high, as I was walking around, I thought, gee, the world looked like this when I was a little kid.
Right.
I remember seeing the sparkling reality and three-dimensionality of things. It
Right.
was sort of like a renewal. Every time you do it, it's a renewal. It's a renewal. So it keeps your head young, so that you keep that always being able to accept a new thing just as easily as a kid would.
Yes.
Most people, they get all this stuff in their head like an old library. And
You gotta blow the
there's
tubes
no room
out.
for the new. Right?
Gotta blow the tubes out.
That's it. No room for the new volume to go in the show.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the reality construction business is that we are taught what reality is in all kinds of ways by everyone around us.
Consensus.
Mostly by language. This is a
Yes.
desk, this is a chair.
Mhm.
The names of stuff.
Right.
The names of stuff.
And you see the little
Even-
guys in the corner of your room, mother tells you they're not there. And immediately they disappear.
Right.
Yeah, immediately, but
Right.
they disappear.
Something like that, yeah. Something like that.
You're not supposed to see those things. But yet, in all the mystical, certainly you gain that from reading Castaneda.
Absolutely.
All that stuff that's there that it isn't part of your consensus, so you ignore it.
That's
It's
right.
an enhanced awareness that he talks about.
Yeah.
But see, the media jump on electronic LSD with virtual reality.
I know.
And the problem just with saying LSD
It's
is
already
that
a problem.
enough time has gone by that there is no distinction between psychedelics and other drugs.
No,
drugs,
psychedelics
that's
are
a
drug.
problem.
Psychedelics are not drugs. They're
I don't know whether you
just
saw
not
John
drugs.
Carroll's column the other day about Valium, about benzodiazepams.
Right.
But for some reason, that's not a drug. I mean, Nancy Reagan probably takes Valium.
Probably.
Well, it's a serious
It's
drug.
the most-
Because
it's
convulsions
the worst-
and
It's a
stuff.
nasty drug.
It's
Yeah.
bad, like red.
It's a right.
Reminds me
So
a little of red.
We have this big denial problem in our society.
Well, I'll say.
And when you, as you know, threaten someone who's in denial, then they will either cut you off
Yeah.
or seek to destroy you.
Absolutely.
At the
If
same
you get
time,
up,
that there's this electronic LSD potential. There are actually anti-cancer drugs have been designed and patented using this to dock molecules.
Yeah.
There are actual communication systems that are being built to enable people enable eye surgeons to get inside the eye and vascular surgeons to get inside the arteries. So you
Shut the
could
door, Bear, would you?
you could see a social reaction in which people would want to regulate this technology because they're threatened by it and thereby cause a lot of harm.
Mm-hmm.
There are several scenarios that are happening at once. The other scenario is that the Japanese are going for this in a big way.
Oh, of course.
The United States,
I don't
Americans,
think they have the cultural bias.
yes.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, there's several
Japanese
reasons.
are hard to figure out.
They're
I
communicating.
got it.
Yes.
I
Well,
think
they
about
count
it.
on that.
It's the way they write. You ever
Yes,
read McLuhan?
right.
It's because they don't write in alphabetic writing. They write in pictographs.
That's right.
So they never became visual. They stayed in the oral world, which is everything is part of reality, which means they can accept any new technology that's not threatening to them. And they can still continue to maintain their traditional culture even in the face of high technology.
I know, but the thing is that they also don't seem to have any particular conscience about destroying stuff.
Well, I think that's a matter
It's
of
odd that
staying alive.
there's also a high level of
like the fish in the sea
appreciation
and stuff.
of nature. There's an aesthetic side to the Japanese that really loves
With
nature
and beauty
and beauty.
proportion, right?
But it's ironic. I mean, it's the thing of
You kill the
well,
dolphins and
that
gill net the.
What the Japanese are the Americans of the 21st century. They're essentially, what's objectionable about them is what was objectionable about Americans when we had the ball.
That's right.
However, they are committed in a way that American technology is not.
Never was.
I've talked to people in Washington, I've talked to people at big companies here. Every big company has some little guy who's an enthusiast off in the corner working in this.
Right.
Japan, it's integrated into their high-level strategy.
Yeah.
They see it as a communication medium because for them, just the words, I mean, this is the problem they have with Americans, is just the words that they say to you is not the complete message.
Uh-huh.
What their facial expressions, their body language,
The whole
there's
ritual.
a lot of context. So
Yeah.
they feel that in order, also, their written language doesn't translate to keyboards well.
Right.
So they have problem communicating with computers. So they really feel that this is that what's missing from telephones and what's missing from computer interfaces is this ability to move around in free space.
Right.
So they're really spearheading this.
Also, they probably want a verbal interface with a computer much more than we do, where you can talk to it.
Yes, that's part of it. Yes.
Which is what will really unlock computers for me.
Well, I've got one.
That you can just talk to.
Yeah, it's you have to train it to recognize your voice,
Uh-huh.
but it's.
Oh yeah, they use.
I have the
these-
Mac CI. It's I forget what the hell the program is.
Oh, it really works.
Oh yeah.
So what do you say? What kind of command?
You tell it. It does all the. You go to the files, the menus, pull things down. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Can you just talk?
You
and
do
it'll
use it
produce
like a
text?
cursor.
Yeah.
Can you just talk?
I
to it, tell it
haven't
a
tried
story?
that because I don't have a program. I don't have many
Words.
word programs. And I'm just getting into it also. It's very new to me, but I have the thing, the headset and everything.
Well, I always
The-
had
the thing is that you have to train it to recognize your voice. That's the kind of funny part.
One of the
It's not
things that
universal.
No.
What I want is one you can just have a conversation like you would with any other person.
Well,
I don't
back
believe
to you.
that is going to happen
I don't
in
think so.
our lifetimes,
I
if
don't.
ever. I think the one thing
thoroughly.
humans are language wizards.
I think fuzzy logic is going to do it. I think fuzzy logic will produce a computer that will even seem to have a personality, will seem to have a character.
Really?
It'll be
Yes.
able to talk to you. It'll be able to translate from one language to another instantaneously. You'll be able to give it instructions. You'll be able to tell it stories. If it doesn't understand something,
Well, I
it'll
know
question
if
you.
such a computer
It's part of
ever
that fifth
exists,
generation
it probably
thing.
won't be designed, it will grow.
Yeah.
It will grow one.
I don't know. I
That's
don't
what the-
really, I don't really
the,
separate the two. I think it's a process rather than a method.
The Artificial Life Conference they're talking about, the
So that's
old
cheap and out
approach
of
to
control.
AI was let's design an intelligence.
Right.
And they ran up against the
Well,
problem that we don't know
model
what
of an intelligence is, right? What the hell is it, right?
However, if we can design things that learn and
Yeah.
compete.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you can grow an
Heuristics,
intelligence by creating an environment
Yeah.
and creating
In
these
which-
things that just do it a million times faster than we do.
Right.
So when I was at Fujitsu, who are planning to do artificial reality adventure interactive fantasies,
Right.
they showed me something called the Neuro Drummer.
Uh-huh.
The neural network is this kind of technology that it's not an algorithm, it's a network that has weights on it, and you
Uh-huh.
can adjust the weight so it learns.
Uh-huh.
You teach it through trials, like you teach it the voice.
Language thing, right.
What they're trying to do is teach it to do what drummers do. A drummer will drum a riff,
Uh-huh.
and then another drummer will drum a riff back that fits into it somehow.
Ah,
Not in a mathematically algorithmic way,
No.
but in a way that fits the guy's taste.
right. Gotcha.
So a drummer will sit down with this machine and drum a riff, and the machine will drum a couple of riffs back at it,
Uh-huh.
and the drummer will drum one that shows it more.
Gotcha.
After
Right.
50 of them,
Heuristic.
it seems like a human being.
Right. I see. Right.
So what they want to do is they want to build these into their artificial reality system
Sure.
so that your artificial reality system learns how you perceive the world.
Right. Well, that's part of that thing of transcending language. You know, part of it going past that because they're going to learn. Then they'll be every person will have their own language.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
There's no reason why something like that couldn't become perfectly conversational, even idiomatic. in any
Absolutely.
language
Right.
whatsoever.
Oh, no
That
problem.
would seem to be a person when you talk to it.
Well, it would be
It would
if
be
you
a
chose
thing
for it
that
to seem that way.
Seem
Sure.
that way, sure.
You can seem whatever way you wanted it to seem.
That's the kind of computer I want. I don't like sitting at a keyboard with a mouse.
No, I'm not a keyboard person. The mouse is better, but
Yeah, but even so.
I use it mostly for graphics, so even the mouse is a little bit.
It's like drawing with a cake of soap.
That's right. That's a good metaphor for it. But they're ever increasing. There's a new digitizing pad that works with a pencil like a stylus, and it also has the thing of that the harder you press, the wider the line is, so that you
That's
can get a
great.
dynamic line, which you never used to be able to
What's
get.
that called?
I don't know. I just saw it in a catalog. I haven't got it yet. But I don't even know. It may be glitchy to beat the band. I've tried a few pads, and they're all a little bit. They're a little weird, but it's another way. You know, the cursor,
A lot of them are
the mouse is not that great.
object oriented rather than bitmap too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Those are the ones I like. They're much smoother looking, not so jiggy jaggy.
Uh-huh.
It's hard for me to relate to drawing on something that comes out in little jiggy jaggies.
Well, that has to do also with the resolution of what you're looking at. Too.
Yes, right.
It helps. So there's lots of things that have sort of anti-biasing now. So that when you make a line, if the line is a little out of true, you know how it splits up. Well, it just doubles the line and kind of fuzzes it. So you
Right.
get,
I
a
see.
curved line doesn't have little sawtooths around it and so forth.
Oh, great.
It's much smoother. Yeah, the graphic stuff is way better than it was even last year. It's improved a whole.
Well, that's all moving really very, very fast.
Yes, it is.
So since I've started following the story about a year and a half, the first one I saw was at NASA, and it just had wireframe graphics.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
The
Right.
next one I saw was one that you saw at Autodesk.
Right.
And it's got shaded polygons and colors. And,
Right.
I thought, gee, that was
illumination
neat.
points and stuff.
Yeah.
But they have a machine at the University of North Carolina where they have 250,000 separate CPUs,
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Whoa.
one for each pixel. So
Whoa!
every picture element has its own computer.
Incredible.
So, I mean, there's Alvin
Very
Ray
simple, but-
Smith is the guy at Pixar who's sort of the
Pixar, yeah.
computer graphics wizard.
Right.
His statement is reality is 80 million polygons per second.
Ah.
So, question is, are we going to reach a threshold like film is
Like
24
film.
frames a second, right?
Well,
you
70
reach that
frames.
threshold and suddenly it's a reality, the illusion.
70 frames.
70
70
frames.
frames,
70.
yeah. Yeah, right. Have you
is
seen this stuff? Show scan, they call it? It's Doug Trumbull, the special
Yeah.
effects guy. Well, his discovery, he discovered that
24, isn't it?
the smallest
Sure.
discrete event that you can perceive is a 70th of a second. And so they have a film stock and a camera
That goes that
that
fast.
runs at 70 frames a second, and I mean it has so much more information.
Yes.
It doesn't double show each frame then.
No,
It
it's
shows it what
70
time.
frames
So
a
every one
second.
is different. Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
And I mean it is,
That should be good.
So
It's
if 80 million
incredible,
polygons a second is reality,
That's right.
what happens to you when you live in a world at 160 million?
well, maybe it's more than enough, or maybe you
Yeah,
perceive,
right. It just
maybe you
isn't-
perceive
yeah.
more, or maybe you don't.
So maybe it's a little less fuzzy.
Yeah,
There's a little less-
fuzzy.
It's like the faster that you can sample sound when you're digitizing it, the higher the frequency, the less phase ambiguity at the higher frequencies. there
Right.
are.
That's the way it is with sound stuff. Yeah, is that it goes up there. The information is there. You may not perceive it, but it does affect the lower orders.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there are places where it just peaks out, and it goes beyond it's like the color spectrum. It just simply goes beyond where you can perceive it anymore, but it's still going on.
Yes.
And if
Something
you
like you can't see a
decide that
bullet.
if you decide that the invisible continuation of the color spectrum is important to your sense of what reality is about, then you would want to extend it. Yeah, you
Yes.
want to extend it as far as you could for just as an aesthetic.
But don't you think that it gets beyond aesthetics and gets
Well, then you
begins
start to get
metaphysical?
truly metaphysical, absolutely,
Sure.
because then you're out there. Then you're if it's so that amounts to fiddling with the fabric of reality.
Yes.
I mean-
that's the question.
Well, it's like you can't see a pistol bullet, and you can't see an M14 bullet. One's
No.
traveling at 800 feet per second, the other's traveling for 4,000.
That's
When
right.
you get to the point where you can't see it that much faster than something you can't see is not
No,
physiologically interesting to you. So,
no,
I mean,
not necessarily. Right, not
It's
necessarily.
there.
Only insofar as the one of them hits you faster than the other.
That's all.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
but see, when it comes to seeing,
No.
though,
No,
once
that-
they
that's
go
why the
faster than a
perception
certain
part of it-
speed, you can't see it.
That's right.
And how much faster is
Faster.
faster? It doesn't matter, right?
No,
It's
not really.
longer. It's no longer physiologically interesting to you or psychologically.
But then there's also the thing of like, well, there's also the harmonic stuff,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
may or
yeah,
may
yeah.
not be. I mean, see, in sound, the high order stuff that's not audible still affects
Sure,
Yeah,
everything
rise
else.
time. for instance.
Yeah, it affects how everything else behaves.
The
So it
faster
may
an
be
event
that
occurs, the more
that
likely-
may happen, there may be a visual metaphor for that somewhere.
Well,
I
also
have
there
no
are
idea.
places Phil goes that are down here.
Yeah, absolutely. They're absolutely physical.
Well, this thing about how much information is in the reality space that you're in.
Well,
and
some
what
of it
is your
starts
reaction
with
to
sound. It crosses over into sensation.
Yeah.
It goes from sound when it goes to below 12 cycles. It starts to be
Yeah.
something you feel rather than hear.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if there's a visual metaphor for that, except that in this universe, the top end is light and the bottom end is real hard stuff. That's another way of looking at it.
Well,
But it's all vibration, according to.
But it's all vibration,
theory.
right?
You know, back when there were light shows,
Yeah.
there was this thing for people to sink into
Absolutely.
together, and the
Yeah,
syncs
yeah.
started happening. The more people got synced into it, the more sync
It became-
started happening.
That's true.
And I guess it's just the size of the venue and traveling around and so forth that it doesn't happen anymore. I don't know why.
Well,
but-
it-
Well,
it's-
there's probably a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons was back in 69 or I think it was 69. All of a sudden, the light show guys who were paid enough money to keep themselves going decided that they were as important as the bands, and led by a guy named Jerry Abrams, they held a strike.
Oh, gee, that's
And
too
he
bad. He
struck
did the
us.
best. He did some of the best shows.
He did do
I
good
know,
shows.
I know, but he struck us out at the Great Highway, the Family Dog out
Yeah.
there, and partway through it, Ramrod and I went out and talked to him. He said, "People don't come to see the light show; they come to hear the band. We like having you there. It's like part of this whole thing that's kind of grown up." And we will pay you a reasonable amount, but we can't meet your demands. There's just no way. What we'll do is we'll just go to theatrical lighting, and you guys will be cut out. And I says, just break it off now, and we'll try and work it out. He wouldn't do it. And that was the end of the light shows. There was virtually none after that.
Yeah,
It
that's
just,
true.
All the bands got together.
And the
in a
few
meeting
people
and
that
says,
really
we're not
did,
going to do this.
like
We
Bill
don't-
Ham used to do a light show that was a light show where you went to the light show. You didn't go to see the band.
Yeah.
You went to the light show, and the light sound dimension, Jerry Garcia and those other guys played music for the light show. You didn't see the musicians. And you went into a place that was real comfortable, and you sat down on pillows and stuff on the floor, carpets, and the room went absolutely black, you know, and they had a really nice screen, and it was a real quality experience. But it's also one of those things that you had to extend yourself to some extent. It's not like going to a movie or going to a concert where something is coming out and getting you. You have to sort of go into it.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, that because light shows are sort of a meditative kind of experience. You know, they're not. It's not like a shock.
They shifted the focus away from standing there and watching the band like you'd stand there and watch a play or watch
That's
an opera
right.
or
It
something.
moved the
and
focus to
bring
everywhere.
The focus out.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which was good in itself, because when we went to the theatrical setup, then the band became more of a central thing, and for the most part, people stopped dancing as much, and it became more of a
Well, the whole
spectator
thing
sport.
the whole thing
rather
changed.
than-
Yeah, the whole thing changed.
Yeah, but see, but that changed again.
Yeah, it keeps
mean-
changing.
Now it's going back towards more dancing and more people wandering around and interacting.
Well, I remember at the McCartney show, you know, our little line of deadheads stood up and danced.
Yeah.
And everyone around us was tremendously uptight.
They're-
Until Paul McCartney said, those of you who are out there dancing, here's a really good one to
Right.
dance to.
Absolutely.
And suddenly it
Everybody
became okay.
Yeah,
Right,
and
exactly.
it's probably an experience that he didn't get enough of.
Didn't get enough of
You
it.
know, he didn't get to play for people dancing. I mean, they had the people shrieking and screaming, and 14-year-old girls when they were playing. He never got to really get out there and play for dancing.
But see, as opposed to a religious gathering that has a theology about the way the universe works, this is something that's reaching toward something.
Well,
It's
yes.
You know, everyone comes to it with the feeling that whatever it is that's going to happen, I don't know what it is.
Right, that's right, and that's what makes it good.
And that's what this virtual reality gives us for all of reality.
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah. Well,
So can you see Grateful Dead concert 10 years from now taking place in cyberspace?
Absolutely. Are you kidding? Sure. Absolutely. I think it's an ideal place for it. Because I mean, part of the whole Grateful Dead thing is that there is no dogma. You know, there isn't anything about how the universe works, and people are free to hear it as they want. You know, they're free to experience it as they want, and we don't push it around.
Right.
So you know, it has some of that. I don't know what to call the kind of. Each person makes their own decisions about what it is that's happening, whether it's good or bad, whether they like it or don't like it, whether they want to lend their energy to it or not, or what. You know, it's an open-ended experience, and I think cyberspace is ideal for that because if anything, it requires more participation.
Yes.
On the part of the observer, so that
Yes.
the uniqueness of their particular experience remains that way. You know what I mean? Not only the event itself. With the Grateful Dead, each show is unique, but further within that, each person's experience of each show is unique.
So it'd be
That's
like
right.
a hot medium.
Yeah,
In the
it'd be
burlesque.
in that sense. I would think of it. Yeah,
interaction.
in that definition, I'd put it in the hot side, not a cool medium. Yeah, it's hot, like the Grateful Dead is hot. It's a participatory, and it's part of the Joe Campbell. That's part of why Joe Campbell liked us so much, you know, and liked to see all this
Right,
stuff.
because he's been going to regular concerts.
That's right. He had no idea that there were
Sure,
people out
cool.
there,
People
you know,
that
doing
sit
what
there and sort of-
he had no idea that was happening. That people were celebrating. That there was current magic.
Yeah, right. It's not quite as intense as it was. I was watching that the film that Zane made, the old acid test film, that she's all kind of spliced it all together. There's
Right.
an interview with you where you said, well, what you liked about the acid test was that you could play or not play, you could be stoned or straight, and it didn't
Yeah.
matter, and if something happened, that was all right, and anything that happened
Well,
was
we're
all
the
right.
only ones that have to deal with that level. I mean, at the Grateful Dead shows, we are required to play. So that
How you
represents a
play,
stricture on us.
Anybody would accept anything that you play.
But how we play is wide open.
That's
Yeah.
right,
But
yeah.
whether we play or not, that's the only
you
decision.
need to do it. That was the
Absolutely.
one difference, isn't it?
That's the difference.
Yeah.
You know, at the acid test, sometimes we didn't play.
Right.
I can't remember
That's
one that
okay.
I was at that you didn't
Yeah,
play.
Muir Beach.
I wasn't at all of them. You played at Muir Beach.
Muir Beach, we played for about 5 minutes and then we left.
You played long enough to really impress the living shit out of me.
Oh yeah, we played long enough.
You
We
did,
played
yeah.
long enough, but we all came completely unglued and everybody just went. Psh,
I
we
came
just
unglued
disappeared.
too.
But the thing was that the option was there. You know what I mean? We could.
It would come and take us all
Absolutely,
away.
that's
the
right.
next
It,
second,
well, it
right?
left all doors open,
And,
Yeah, right.
and now that all the doors are open, and anything can happen.
Yeah,
but
right.
now it's
I love it.
1990, and
We need some more of that.
the world has gone back to normal in a weird
Well,
way.
it's trying to. It's trying to
Except for
pretend
this
it never
weird
happened.
little traveling circus.
Well, and the wave is still on its way out. You know, I mean, the wave
Right.
from the '60s is now banging into Eastern Europe. I mean, a lot of what's going on there, they owe that to the '60s, and they even admitted the people who would talk about it.
yes,
And a big- I mean-
Vaclav Havel,
That's
clearly an old acid head.
Absolutely, and
And
And they made great acid there.
yes,
that's
absolutely.
right. Czechoslovakia was where the
very
first
best.
stuff used to come
The
from.
very best.
It was very good.
Yeah, very good.
And some of the early syntheses that were improvements were from Russians as well as Czechs.
You know,
I thought it was very odd.
it's you know that wave is still going out. It just took way longer than anybody expected. I mean, back when that was exploding on the streets, looked like it was going to take over the world in a couple of weeks. You know.
But the point
acid
about
was
the
too strong.
The point is that meanwhile American society has gone completely. It's gone into denial.
yes, yes.
Well, I don't know that it's so much a consensus what's going on. I think
No,
that there's
I don't
a few
think so.
people who are power manipulators that have gotten control of things.
I don't think it's a consensus at all.
It's
In fact, I don't
generating
think there's
apathy.
much support for it. It really is kind of it's a wireframe deal.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the reality, which is pretending to be reality right now, impersonating reality, is just a pretty flimsy structure. There's not a lot of substance to it. So you can't find people who are actively involved or affected by it. You know what I mean? The things that are, what you see is a completely different world. What you see is the world of the homeless and so forth and so forth. You know.
Yeah.
And I mean the world that you can go walk out inside, you walk around the block, and
Yeah.
that's reality. The reality that's being talked about is something else entirely.
Well,
It's like
also
all
there
those
is the global teenager hypothesis that what happened in the 60s in America was that there was the baby boom cohort grew up at the same time that television and popular music grew up, so that we had this carrier frequency that we all tuned into.
Yeah.
That gave us a feeling of a common culture, even though I was in Phoenix and
Sure.
someone was in Des Moines.
Right.
And that now we're getting a global cohort at the same time that we have our first global communications. You know, MTV is everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
There's a 30-year resonance too.
Yes.
Even that guy Ravi Matra talks about the 30-year resonance. The things that were happening 30 years ago are now very interesting to people, very much in style again. There's some kind of a 30-year resonance that goes through human culture, expresses itself different
Yes.
ways. We're experiencing. When I was down in Australia, everybody down there was saying, well, people from here would come down there and say, it's just like the 60s. It seems like 65 or 66 or something like that, which was kind of interesting because it's really not quite like that. But there is a certain degree of whatever that openness was that we could hook up. It was like an essence in the culture, even though some aspects of it were,
the other day, I felt obligated to get you a couple.
even though it was like, in some ways it was restrictive. Everybody was real careful about not showing their pot to the man and all that sort of thing.
Right.
But at the same time, it was a lot of things were open. There weren't many controls on drugs. It wasn't a
Things
whole
were
lot.
open.
We didn't have thought police or like
They
have
certainly
now.
weren't looking out for you to be weird.
No, that's right.
And if you were weird, you were only weird. You were only acting weird. You weren't necessarily taking drugs.
Right.
I mean, that was the thing. That was part of how we were able to get around and be so weird.
Yeah, right. People just thought
It had
it
an-
looks like theater to me.
Yeah,
That was
it
all they
was
thought.
invisible. It didn't look like something else. Yeah, it did. Yeah, it looked like theater if it looked like anything.
But this, of course, is technology, and
Yeah.
technology is always, Americans love technology. It's like jet planes and hot rods and television sets.
Absolutely.
Motorcycle.
It's a real, it's a conflict between the denial of, gee, this is going to break people out of their regular frames, and gee, it's a new technology, I gotta have it.
Right. People will love it. I mean, well, it'll be like, it's like video games.
See you, nice to meet you.
Hope I didn't interfere too much in your conversation.
No,
Not at all.
I like talking about that stuff.
It's great stuff.
My ear kind of drugs me in.
Sure.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Well, this stuff can go on and on.
Yeah.
I got into that as I showed you this stuff. I got into.
Yeah.
I want to confront the question of what's this electronic LSD stuff, without writing a book about denial in America.
Right.
And so that quote of yours, I felt like needed to be put in some larger context.
It's one of those things, though. I mean, my feeling is that it'd be a good idea to not talk about it in that context anymore, because it's like calling attention to it. Hey, look, this is the next thing to bust. You know, this is the next thing to look into. It'd be nice to be able to not let them start governing it or governing us on the electronic level. I mean, one of the things that's attractive about cyberspace is that it doesn't seem, I mean, that it can be construed as no threat. If you see it through the video game keyhole, you know,
yes.
I mean, the amusement keyhole, the entertainment keyhole, it's no threat. If you see it through the LSD keyhole or the consciousness expanding keyhole, bong, you know, it's like electronic drugs. And
Yes.
It is a threat.
That's right. Well, that's the keyhole that the popular presses watch.
Yeah.
They have not been able to avoid it so far,
No.
including the Wall Street Journal.
I know.
And
It's a little too obvious, I'm afraid.
well, my mission is to try to get a more global view,
Yeah.
and this is part of it.
Mhm.
Sex at a Distance is part of it. I don't know whether I sent that to you too, the teledildonics.
No.
piece. Okay, I'll send that along.
That sounds
John.
fascinating.
But the idea is that you would put on a bodysuit,
Right.
like a body stocking or something,
Right.
and plug in, and your partner is plugged in somewhere else. And
Right.
You have this high bandwidth communication. The mistake most people make is thinking, oh, gee, you're having sex with a machine.
Uh-huh.
No, you're having sex with another person, but it's mediated
By a machine. That's interesting.
So you see this representation in three space.
Yeah.
And that representation could look like anything your partner wants it to look like.
Right.
Or anything you want it to look like.
Gotcha. I love
And you
that.
reach out and touch it with your virtual hand.
Right.
And the sensors, the actuators, and your partner's bodysuits will transmit that feeling of touch. So
Right.
they will feel your hand. So what is it about sex? Is it the sensations, or is it the meanings and the communication game that's tied into that?
Yeah, well, it's the whole package, probably. I mean,
People who have phone sex
That's right.
can put these symbolic tokens through a line.
That's right, it's
and
in the
unpack
mind.
them and create a whole experience.
That's right. An awful lot of it is in the mind. Yeah. I mean,
So,
most of it probably.
Now this is an appalling idea to a lot of people.
I guess it
We've
is.
got a planet in which we don't want to have everybody having sex.
That's right.
And most people are lonely anyway.
That's right. Really lonely.
There's sort of a continuing problem of putting a moral template on the future that's based on the morality of today.
That's the problem. That's precisely the problem, the moral template. First of all, who's evolving the moral template and where are they evolving it from? I think part of what has to happen somewhere pretty soon is that a human template has to come up, you know what I mean?
Yes.
We have to start with, okay, let's throw out all this other stuff, everything we've thought about it before, throw out all our models, and start with a human. What's a human, you know?
Well, no, that is the ultimate question.
You know, because you can't make rules regarding the moral behavior of something unless you know what the hell it is and what its capacities are, what it can do, what it can't do, and so forth. For example, I think like the Muslim religion is a little too tight. You know, it doesn't fit humans. Humans can't possibly fit into it. So there's a lot of really unhappy people, terribly repressed.
Yes.
You know, and it's a religion that works against you because the template don't fit. It's non-human.
Right.
You know.
That's right.
You know, so, and what we need is something that, what we need is a definition of a human starting from the ground up, so that the suitable moral structure that goes around it makes sense. The context has to come from the human first, rather than bits and pieces of fragments of old religion and, you know, all the old moral superstructure, whatever it used to be.
Yes.
I mean, we're experiencing real confusion here in the United States. You know, why is it okay to drink, but it's not okay to take drugs, blah, blah, blah. So,
That's right.
you know, what's a crime? You know, what's criminality? What can you do? What can't you do? And so forth. All these things are really confusing, and a lot of it is really contradictory. It doesn't really
Yes.
make sense. And rather than end up with more law than anybody can ever deal with, you know, something so cumbersome, it needs the brush needs to be cleared away, and a whole new structure needs to be set up there somehow. I think, anyway. I think that's part of one of the problems that's making things so weird.
Well, one of the things we know now that we didn't know then is that revolutions are very painful to a lot of people.
Yes.
And that at the stage that we've evolved into now, a revolution would be extremely painful.
Real painful.
So if we don't have a revolution and we don't have the time for evolution, where does it come from? It must come from some kind of shared experience that everyone agrees upon.
That's it. That's got to be it.
So here, what we're talking about in this evolution that goes back to the caves is, well, how the heck do you get everyone to share an experience?
Well, you have to try to create an objective experience, first of all. I mean, I think that you have to start there. There's the Gurdjieffian definition of objective art, the notion that there is some art that says the same thing to everybody. We need something like that. We need an objective experience that says the same thing to everybody. What that is, I don't know. But virtual reality may be the key to it.
Yes. Maybe there is no objective experience, but there's a certain way
but there's
of
a consensual,
relaxing with all the subjective experiences.
That's right. There's a consensual agreement to something that's relatively comfortable, like the template, the moral template or the human template. Okay, we feel every human, every Eskimo, everybody, every culture can fit into this template, regardless of what they believe or what they think about themselves or how their language is constructed or what the quality of their life is like. Something along those lines.
Well, isn't music related to that?
Music is more objective, I think, than a lot of art is, but a surprising amount of it is cultural. I mean, the Western ears have a hard time hearing anything that isn't in 4/4 time, and you know, a lot of cultures experience music in 5/8. You know, for example, 5/4. You know, so I mean, music is also has, if not. If you think of music as a universal language, it still has some extremely powerful dialects.
Yes.
You know, so in that sense, most musicians can, regardless of what culture they come from, can get together and agree on some stuff about music. There's always got to be a common ground. I think that's true. And music is a universal language insofar as that you don't need to know anything else about a musician that you're playing with other than that they can play music. And it doesn't matter what their music is, you'll find something that you can play together, what their culture is. That's true. But then there will be the like I say, the dialect part of it comes into play, but nothing like the differentiation that language sets up, for example. So yeah, music, and what's more, music is I mean, in the last 100 years since the invention of sound reproduction, music has really taken off, and is much more a common language because of records and
yes. Now we're beginning
transportation
to hear about world music.
absolutely. I think that it's very now you can't. There's no place you can go where you don't hear certain kinds of music. I mean, you'll just about everywhere in the world. You know, you can. When we first went to Egypt, I mean, it didn't matter how small the village was. There was somebody there playing music from, you know, disco music, which was big at that time.
Uh-huh.
You know, you could hear it everywhere.
Uh-huh.
And that was the first surprise, you know. I mean, the first surprise is the technology. Walkmans are everywhere.
Yes.
You know, so you can hear, you know, that
And
part.
that's the thing about the Japanese getting into the reality business is that there's going to be reality man everywhere.
Everywhere, right? Exactly, right. It's inevitable.
Well, so, the metaphor I always use is I don't know whether he still does it, but Ali Akbar Khan, go to one of his concerts 20 years ago, and he would spend 20 minutes tuning up his instrument.
Sure.
And it always seemed to me that it shouldn't take that long to tune your
Nobody's
instrument.
tuning the audience, too.
He's tuning the audience.
Absolutely.
And I always, so what, every time you get up and play a concert, you and Bobby do space.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
In the last 25 years, you get up on stage, for 25 minutes, you reach out there.
Well, we want to maintain some area that's absolutely unstructured. Absolutely, totally unstructured.
So it's sort of like, I mean, this is my interpretation of it, is that you've got this kind of carrier wave that
That's
you
it.
continue to put out there, and the more sensitive you get to it being unstructured and you don't know what it is, the more attuned it is to something in the air.
Well, it finds structure. It finds expression. If we're lucky. If not, then again, this is one of those things that's totally subjective kind of experience. There are times when we feel like we're really clicking into something here, but it's definitely you have to be alert in a certain way. You have to be ready, and also you have to discard notions that are fondly held by a lot of musicians, about sequences of notes and about scales and about musical systems as a whole. If you think of music as a language, the space part of it is where you throw out all the syntax.
So, everyone around the earth, maybe, is going to have this little console that can switch them into somewhere. There's still going to...
It'll be the free channel, the consensus channel on video, or your cable TV or whatever.
So that may be where we find out what humans are for.
It may take that to do it. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I can visualize something like that where it's the input channel as well as the output channel, where you take from it, you give to it, and take from it at the same time. It'd be like a free two-way kind of deal, and everybody would be, and it would be constantly making decisions. Microsecond to microsecond.
Yes.
And switching around and doing stuff of its own. So you'd enter yet another random element in there, and then see what comes through the spaces. And my feeling is that there is a coherence there, but it's not recognizable through normal frameworks. You need a hyper-normal framework.
Yes.
So that it's. You need to jump to hyper-normalcy.
Well, there are always a few people who are hyper-normal.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. I think everybody experiences them here and there. That's all. It's just we don't have good language for speaking about them, really. And,
that's right. But that's what a lot of the semiotic soup that the deadhead culture has. There is a lot of language.
Well, it's being invented.
Refer to things.
That's right. It's being invented, and deadheads are inventing it pretty well.
What's interesting, though, is how similar it is to what Campbell was talking about. With the very symbols are the same.
Same stuff.
Well, I could go on and on, but I only asked for about an hour, and I've taken about an hour, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Totally enjoyed it.
End of Jerry Garcia interview.